Welcome to our fourth installment of Teens, Tools, and Hope, a parent and educator series. And tonight, we're very thrilled that we have Lainie Liberti with us with Transformative Mentoring for Teens. Lainie is the author of Seen, Heard, and Understood, Parenting and Partnering with Teens for Greater Mental Health. She published the Amazon best-selling book in May of 2022 and is the founder and creator of Transformational Mentoring for Teens that launched in early 2020, offering virtual one-on-one coaching for teens, as well as a 12-week course designed to transform lives, and is a certified life coach specializing in transformational coaching. So welcome, Lainie.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really thrilled to be here. I think the series that you are producing and offering to the public is so powerful, and I am a massive believer in tools. And so we're going to talk about a little bit about tools. I'm going to share with you some information about why tools are important, the type of work that I do. I'm going to share with you a little bit about my book, Seen, Heard, and Understood, Parenting and Partnering with Teens for Greater Mental Health. So I'm going to start off by giving you guys just a teeny bit of background, and that will, kind of set the stage for the conversation we're going to have. And I was telling Judy before we started, I love interaction. I love conversations. I talk a lot, but if anybody has questions or there are comments or if anybody needs clarity on anything that I'm talking about, please, by all means, interrupt me.
And we will, Lainie.
Oh, of course.
I love hearing you talk, though. It's so exciting. You're so animated, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. So I just want to give you guys just a quick background. I don't want to waste too much time on that. There's a lot of information on the internet about the work that I've been doing. So if you're really interested, just search for my name, and a lot of stuff will come up, I promise. So why do I do the work that I do? The reason why I do the work that I do is twofold. I'm a parent, and that is my absolute pride and joy, and I just love being a mom to my son. His name is Miro, and you'll hear me talk about him quite a bit. Just for reference, so he just turned 24, so I've got a full-fledged adult, and it's crazy to me. And I'm going to say to you, if you're watching this and you're a parent of a teen, oh my God, it goes fast. It goes so fast. Don't blink. You're going to miss some of it. So, I love being a parent. My journey and my origin story, I'm going to go back to 2008 for a second, and then I'm going to go a little bit farther. But in 2008, what happened was, I'm from California. Everybody from California knows that we had an economy crash, and lives changed. I, at the time, was an owner of a branding agency and had worked in advertising and marketing branding for 18 years. So that was my career path. That's what I did. I owned my own agency for the last 8 of those years. And when the crash happened, I knew that I was going to have to let my staff go at the end of 2008. I saw my clients drop left and right. I served green eco companies for the most part and nonprofits, and they were the first to be affected by the economy crash. And it was just really kind of devastating. But at the time, I was really overworked and stressed, and I was kind of done. And my son was 9, and he used to say to me all the time, "Mom, you're always working. You never spend any time with me." And that was like a knife into my heart. I can't even tell you how much that that was so hard, because, Judy, I thought I was doing what I was doing for my family. Like, I was following all the, the things that you're supposed to do. I was working hard. I was providing. I was, the sole, caretaker of my child, single mom. And that's just what I had to do. And so I always sort of rationalized and justified it, but I've got to do this. Who else is going to do it? I'm taking care of this family. But every time he said that to me, I thought, God, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something else. And after recognizing that I wasn't bringing my staff back, one night in the office, it was like 9 p.m. It was October, and I remember it was a cold night in LA. And I looked over and I said to him, just based off of inspiration, I had no idea where this came from, but I just looked at him and I said, Miro, what do you think if we get rid of all this stuff and just go have an adventure? And he's like, I'm in. And then his follow-up question to me was, do I have to go to school? I was like, no, let's do this. And I knew that we decided in that night that let's go travel for a year. That sounds great. A year. And that's for somebody who's living a conventional life. A year is like a lifetime. That seems like a really long time. But I knew that 1 year of travel, he'd learn way more than he would ever learn in 5th grade. So I'm like, yeah, no school, forget it. So I wasn't a homeschooler or a world schooler or an unschooler or any of those things, but I just knew that this was the right path. And so we set out in 2009, which I was just telling my partner, July, it'll be 15 years. We'll be starting our 15th year out of LA, out of the country. And
wow.
New life. It's crazy. Like I said, guys, don't blink. It goes so fast. So we took off, and this is kind of getting to the juicy part. Leaving, I knew that I required scaffolding. I required some sort of foundational, structure to help me make this make sense. And I've always been somebody who has used tools. And scaffolding to me meant I had some way to measure and stay sane. And I brought my son in onto this whole idea of, okay, here's our foundational tools. The first one that we used, our scaffold, that I call our scaffolding, was we had to understand about our comfort zones. And the comfort zone is a tool that I think is really, really powerful for any family that is seeking to be in greater partnership. And in essence, comfort zone is this circle inside of a circle. And those are the spaces where we feel comfortable. These are the spaces where we relax, rejuvenate, and sort of exhale and can really be ourselves. And those are the spaces that we really need to identify. So for us, we were traveling, and so he had to identify what his comfort zone was. So when we were in a space where we were not in our comfort zone, we know that we could go back to that, because we weren't bringing our rooms with us, or our bed, or those physical places or objects. We had to really identify and define what made our comfort zone. So that was our first step. And then we talked about the space outside of the comfort zone. And directly outside of the comfort zone, most people say you're in your comfort zone or outside of the comfort zone. Well, we gave it a little more definition, and the outside of the comfort zone is called the stretch zone. And we've identified that outside of the comfort zone, in this circle directly surrounding the comfort zone, the stretch zone is the place where we grow, we learn, we are challenged. The magic happens there. And from a neurobiological perspective, when we're learning, when we're bringing new experiences into our lives and to our actual joint experience, we're writing new neural pathways. And the writing of new neural pathways means you're stretching or growing, and that's not comfortable. And in fact, the discomfort is something that we knew immediately that we had to identify and create language around, and to be able to communicate. I'm in my comfort zone or I'm in my stretch zone. What does it feel like? What's happening? And as we know from a neurobiological perspective, we are actually growing. And then the space outside of the stretch zone is called the panic zone. And that's really important to understand as well, because the panic zone is the space where our amygdala comes on line and takes over. And this is the oldest part of the human brain. This part is designed to keep us safe. It's a survival instinct. And identifying when we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, those are the actual responses that keep us safe and keep us in survival mode. Now, understanding that the biological reason that we go into that space is very different than stretching. And I write about that quite a bit in my book. Stretch zone, comfort zone, and panic zone. And if you are somebody who has picked up my book, you will be aware, and I'm going to show you real fast what this looks like. Looks like that.
Oh, okay. That helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you go into your panic zone, it's important to understand that everything else, your rationality, your reasoning, your communication, goes offline. So there is a true biological reason why we go into panic zone. Again, a bear's chasing you. You're either going to climb up the tree, you're going to play dead, you're going to fight, or maybe not with a bear, but the fawning response would be, nice bear, nice bear. You don't want to hurt me, nice bear. It doesn't work with bears. Don't try it. But that's what the fawn response is, right? And we're not designed to stay in that state for very long. We come back online, re-regulate our system, and then we can process. We can continue to rationalize and reason and communicate and talk about it. But when we're in the panic zone, none of that happens. And so having a young child or a teenager, a child of any age, and normalizing this kind of language is so vital to, again, creating connection and partnership. So that was one of the pieces of scaffolding that I used. We talked about that. We also talked about emotions, and developing a strong EQ or emotional intelligence is so important. And part of that is the language around identifying what it is that you're feeling. And just practicing that from a young age is really powerful. And so we incorporated that. Let's talk about the emotions. What are the purpose for emotions? Why do emotions visit us? What are they true? Are they not true? And all of these kinds of pulling, what's happening in our internal worlds apart becomes part of the tool set that we relied upon, because again, we came from a very traditional, semi-traditional life, conventional life in Los Angeles. And now you've thrusted two people together. We decided, but two people together 24/7, which is something that we weren't accustomed to. Because before that, we each had our lives. He had school, I had work, I had a lot of work, and not a whole lot of time for the togetherness part. So creating this scaffolding or this set of tools for us was really vital. We used a bunch of other tools like partnership. That was one of the intentional foundations that we used before we started traveling. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about partnership parenting and what that looks like. And we also relied on core values. Now, I told you that my history came from the world of advertising and branding. Well, using core values is one of the tools that you use in order to create messaging and so forth in branding. And so I was really familiar with how to define core values, how to run them through your filters to see if it's in alignment with who you are. And then my son was invited to verbalize and vocalize his core values, which at 9 or 10 years old, it's not very common, but it was a wonderful conversation. So his core values, the challenge was to come up with 5. I came up with my 5 core values, and together we came up with our family's 5 core values. Now, because we lived in partnership and we did not live in an authoritarian paradigm, which meant I was not the boss and I was not telling him where he was going, I set it up so we could create a life together in partnership, and this was our joint adventure. I didn't want to have rules. And in fact, I'm an anarchist, so I don't like rules anyway. And so we figured out that the best way to live without rules is to live in alignment with our core values. And so a decision came up. We would run the decision through the filter of our core values. The question is very simple. Is the yes in alignment with our core values? And if it's not, we know that that's a clear no. But it wasn't because there was a rule saying that we couldn't do that. It gave us permission to then become more in alignment with what was important to us. An example would be we received an invitation to go, I don't know, go take an adventure, a side adventure to a waterfall with somebody. So maybe we didn't know this person, and maybe it was just an invitation from another traveler or from a family that lived in the country that was our host country. And if we felt safe and we felt like, and part of that too was really coming into alignment with our own intuition. And there's a tool in my book about putting your hand on your heart and on your stomach to align both your intuition with your heart. And that really helped us to understand whether or not our intuition was saying this was safe. And the yes from a cognitive perspective became a yes because it was in alignment with our values. So we had many tools, a lot of scaffolding. And again, your series is all about tools, which excites me to no end. So that was one of the things that we used in order to keep ourselves safe. So that's kind of a brief overview of my origin story from 2008, 2009. And then I'm just going to take it to my childhood for just a real short moment, because that also is important. I was raised in LA, in California, and I was raised with a lot of trauma. And so it was an abusive household, and it really affected my own development. And I had a really rough time as a teenager. And part of the reason why I'm so in tune with tools, why it's so important to me, is one of my trauma responses from my childhood was hyper independence. I could do it. I don't need anybody else, all of the stuff that goes around that. So it served me in many respects, but young adolescence through my young adulthood, the hyper independence became that thing that drove me. And so I discovered that I was an autodidactic. I could learn anything because I was a really good researcher. And I also understood that I had the power within me to live the life that I wanted. And as a young woman, I decided that I was going to heal all this shit. I was going to heal it. I didn't want it. I didn't want to take it with me. That was so important. And I noticed pattern after pattern after pattern in my personal, interpersonal relationships. And those were things that I wasn't proud of that I needed to heal. And I knew before I became a parent, that stuff needed to be dealt with. And I knew I always wanted to be a parent. So having that kind of background and the hyper independence and being a very self-empowered, self-directed learner thrusted me into a role of being a self-empowered, self-directed healer. And a lot of the stuff that I discovered through my 20s and 30s before I became a parent, and even now into my 50s, has been based on using tools to empower myself, to heal myself. And I just want to add a quick caveat. The word healing is a misnomer. I don't like that word. It's used in our vernacular to describe, moving from one thing into a healthier state. But what I like to say about the whole concept of healing is, especially with trauma and childhood trauma, you don't heal it to get rid of it. And that is what most people think of when they say, oh, I healed my childhood trauma. And it doesn't happen. You can heal, but you don't get rid of it. Healing means integrating it into your system, yourself, knowing who you are. The self-awareness is what's important. It's not about getting rid of your childhood trauma. It's about using the childhood trauma to understand who you are and how you tick. And when I teach courses or facilitate courses for teens, one of the first analogies that I give is we've got hardware. Teens are on computers and phones, and the hardware is the stuff that runs the software. The hardware is your computer hard drive, it's your RAM, it's all of that stuff. And I want you to think of the hardware as your brain. The software is the programming, and we all have programming because we're all humans. And every single experience that we have, throughout your lifetime adds programming. It writes neural pathways, it creates connections, and our brain, the hardware, is part of the job is to create meaning in all of that. And sometimes the meaning that our brain creates based on our past experiences, even if it's stored in our subconscious, is not actually true. And that's kind of hard to deal with the very first time you hear this or recognize or realize that. Because if I've always thought this thought about myself, and a pattern of thinking creates what we know as truth. And the hardware, the brain, doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. It just knows the patterns that continue to be thought. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because we don't get rid of the patterning. What we can do is make friends with the patterning and understand when that software is running. And we can reprogram software, but it's going to have its sort of like ghost effects running in the background. And if you don't recognize and realize what's playing in the background, and it could be your subconscious where you're not even aware of it, but your reactions and responses and your triggers and the way that you view the world is all a reflection of that stuff, then you're walking through the planet not really knowing who you are and why you're viewing and seeing things the way that you do. So you don't heal that stuff, but learning to integrate it to make sense of how your own brain works. The software is running, it's there, you may as well understand it. That's the important part. So for me to go through all of that and understand that I do have patterning, that the things that I was exposed to when I was, from a child, from birth to through, the end of my adolescence, while my brain was developing, was creating patterns of thought. And so for me, I had to really understand how to make that make sense. And that's a big part of the work that I did. And I didn't know that this work that I did for me on me was going to be a big part of my life until I became a parent. Because let me tell you, those of you that are watching this, I know you're parents. Every part of your parenting journey, there are places that are tender inside of you that your kids intuitively know how to push on. And those are the spaces where they're there to be our teachers, to help us to remember to be kind to ourselves, that we had trauma or that we had some patterning that may not serve us anymore. And so tools are an amazing way to be able to make friends with that stuff. And so as we started to travel, I started to remember all of these things, and being together with another human being 24/7 for, not anymore, but I'd say it was 12 years solid without a break. Like, that's a long time. I love my child and I loved being with him, but it wasn't easy because stuff comes up, and so there you go. So we have the scaffolding, we have the tools, we have the accountability, and we were in partnership. And that became a huge part of the journey. And so hopefully you've got an understanding of not only my background, but why we chose partnership and what partnership means. And just to be clear, when you're in a partnership, it doesn't mean that everybody's the same. It means that we all come with different experiences and different skill sets, and we all hold different sets of responsibilities, but nobody's the boss of anybody else. But if I excel at one thing and somebody else in the partnership excels at another thing, it's pretty obvious that the people that excel at the things that they do, those are the things that they do and they bring to the partnership. So it doesn't mean you're exactly the same, but it means that nobody's the boss of anybody. And I want you to think about the journey into partnership as a side-by-side journey. It's not like one person's pulling another. Come on, this is good for you. You're going to do this my way. I said so. That's not partnership, right? And you can be in partnership with more than one person. I know that people always say, but I've got 5 kids. I've got 5 kids. How can I partner with them? Well, the same way. Again, we're not talking about everybody's the same. We're talking about levels of cooperation and collaboration. And it takes a commitment of communication and knowing the internal worlds. And the reason why I talk a lot about the internal worlds and what's happening is that's the you that you bring to the partnership. So you got to know the you, because not only are you accountable to you, but you're accountable from the inner worlds to whomever you're in partnership with. And the modeling of that to young children all the way through their adolescence into adulthood is the gift that you can give them. And let me tell you the byproduct of that. It's the most spectacular thing. It's connection. Connection is the thing that is the most important thing over, sit down and do your homework. Did you do your homework? Why? Because I told you to, all that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is the connection. And Oftentimes when I work with parents of teens, they get really stuck in the stage where their kids are right now. So you got a 14-year-old, guess what? You've got a 14-year-old for 1 year. You've got a 17-year-old for 1 year. And where they are developmentally is only in this space of time right now. And I know that sounds obvious, but as parents, and especially parents of teens, that can be triggered, oftentimes forget that they're going through what they're going through. Their teens are going through what they're going through right now, and it's not going to be forever. And if your teen right now is lazy and really finding their own voice, and that means sometimes that they're rude to you, it doesn't mean that this is who they're going to be for the rest of their life. It means that developmentally, they're working some stuff out. I write a lot in my book about the developmental stages and what you can expect as a parent of an adolescent. And that helps parents sometimes exhale. But the remembering part that what they're going through right now is what they're going through right now. That's it. That's it. It's just right now. And because they're lazy or because they've withdrawn and, whatever the thing is that triggers you to no end, it just means that that's what they need to be doing right now because of where they are in their developmental stage. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you again, this is my book, Seen, Heard, and Understood, Parenting and Partnering with Teens for Greater Mental Health. And in this book, I have a whole chapter of tools. There's probably 30 tools throughout the book, but the one of the last chapters is specifically tools. And part of what I write about is the journey that parents must take in order to first understand their own internal worlds. Number two, understand the developmental stages of their teens. And I go into a lot of the neurobiological, psychological, and developmental stages. So you can understand that the things that they're doing is not crazy. I also have a chapter, it's important, right? And I also have a chapter of red flags, things to look for, and how to partner with your teens. And finally, the invitation is to use the tools yourself as the parent and facilitator of your teens. So when you use those tools, the vulnerability and the sharing of what you've discovered about you as the parent models your own internal work, which creates connection. The theme of the book is connection over coercion, and there's a million ways to achieve that. So pick up my book and read it. For sure. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I've got a lot I can talk about. I can go into specific tools. Just let me know if there's any clarity that I need to, expand on, or if there's questions or anything I can help you guys with.
I have a question, Lainie. I have lots of questions. Not that you're not clear and not wonderful. I love what you're saying. There's just so much juice in just this short, 30 minutes or so. Thank you so much. One of the things that keep popping up for me, and I'm sure that a lot of the other parents have questions, and that is, over your course of doing this course of evolution of your world schooling, of your travel, what is it that because you started off, of course, learning with your son and doing it together, what are some of the key light bulb moments that, I didn't realize that this was going to come out of this? Or what are some of the key evolutionary light bulbs that have gone off during your years of doing this with traveling with teens and world schooling?
Yeah. My biggest aha moment was recognizing that the outer world experiences are a reflection of our inner world. And I didn't really come to terms with that until I started to host these teen retreats. And when we take a group of teens outside of their comfort zone, sometimes out of the country, the first time that they've been out of the country, always out of the country, out of their own home country, always out of their own home country, but sometimes the first time out of their home country for the first time, it is an outside of your comfort zone experience. And the way that teens or any human being deals with newness or change is a reflection of their own inner development. And if something is happening outside and they're not in a good state, or feeling fear, or not feeling safe or secure or attached or seen or heard, that can be a tremendous negative experience for them. So the connection between the inner world and the outer world became so incredibly obvious for me. It was a huge aha moment. The other thing that blew me away was especially in the Western world, and those that are from the United States specifically, because that's my background, we have a worldview that is so finite. We have a very US-centric, American-centric worldview, and that colors the way that we perceive people outside of the United States. And so I'll give you an example. We did a trip to Ecuador one year, and we were working with a conservationist, and we worked with the whales. And so we assisted with whale watching, and we were working with the scientists, and it was really fascinating because we learned a lot about the marine biology. But on the same trip, we also met fishermen that saw the oceans as their the place where they fed their families and they earned a living, and it was really important. And they would go out early in the morning and they'd come back to the shore, and the area that we were staying was called Puerto Lopez, and it was this whole shore of fishermen boats that would come in, and in the afternoon they'd start chopping the heads off the fish and throwing them right on the shore, and there were bloody fish heads and guts all over the shore. And it was just part of how they did, their livelihood, how they treated their livelihood. Then we also we volunteered with a school that was in Puerto Lopez also. And the school children thought of the ocean as a totally different dynamic. It was a place where they played and they surfed, and their families went to the beach. And so we had these three very distinct groups, all from the same country, thinking of this area very differently. So that the perspectives of the ocean, just that specific detail, the ocean was perceived by these three very different groups very differently. And it gave us a lot to think about, because now here we are as an observer and a guest in this country. And a lot of us sat in judgment. A lot of us said what's right, what's wrong. And then we were able to unpack all of the different perspectives. That's 4 distinct perspectives. And we all, at the end of this massive conversation about worldviews, had this big sort of sigh, like, wow, we can have opinions, but as somebody who travels, as somebody who is visiting another country, is it our place to actually judge? Is it our place to think one group of people is right, one group of people is wrong? Maybe as somebody who's traveling, it's our place to observe and explore and use the filter of our own values to decide how we're going to, behave in this particular area, which was the coast. And that really gave us a lot of insight. And I remember how powerful these conversations were with a group of teens. And the other thing that was so amazing was I recognized and realized that most of the teens had never been asked what they thought. Most of the teens never had a vehicle or a platform to actually talk philosophy. And that was really powerful to me too, because they're deep thinking human beings, just like we all are. But most of the time, adults don't sit down and have those sorts of conversations with teens, and they are missing out because the most amazing ideas and perceptions came from the empowerment of just sitting and listening and asking what their perceptions were. It was powerful for me. It was powerful for them, and it just expanded my world tremendously. And we talk a lot about diversity. How can we commit to being those people that allow different viewpoints to sit side by side? How can we be those people that are the caretakers of lots of different perspectives? And how can we, as those people, I'm trying to diffuse the others, because we do that in Western culture. But how can we be the people that are the peacemakers? And these are skills that are expanded and explored during world schooling, and I think it's really important. So the philosophy, the world views, the aha moments, and of course, recognizing that the way that we see the outside worlds are a reflection of our inner worlds. So yeah.
I love that. And I have one more question, and please, I'm going to open it up to everybody else on the call, but I have one more quick one, because I love the distinction of the inner world and the outer world, and the importance that you showcase about intuition training for our teens and ourselves. Yet what I really wanted to focus in on was when you talk about if we have tenderness within ourselves as adults, for something perhaps that's gone, not unheeded to, that might have been a childhood trauma or something like that. And and our teens and our youth in our world, our family, they can sense that in some way. And I often thought, wow, wouldn't that be wonderful that our children are to us as as inviting us to do our own inner work. So I love that you do that. I feel that myself, that our youth are there as our teachers. And we can shift that whole thing around, that it's so important to not only for the teens, but for the adults in their midst.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I can't add anything more to that.
I just love it. And I want to open it up. Anybody else have a question? Just take yourself off mute, and I'd love it to have a question. Maria.
Well, more than a question, is a commentary, because for me, I believe the same even for younger kids.
Yeah.
Like, after all, it's not about any age. It's more about any other human being can be a teacher if we become learners.
I love that.
So it's about our attitude and like that open curiosity that we can have, because I experience that with kids even younger, as young as 4. And there's more, like they can become my teachers when I'm open for that. And I love what you said about the teenagers, this ability to think about life, and when you open to that, it's beautiful when we can create space for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. What a beautiful comment. Thank you.
I love that, every age. And anyone else on the call want to come off mute and have a question for Lainie? I'm sure you have questions and comments. It's so rich and chock full of insight and inspiration. Thank you, Lainie.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Manu, Diana, Deb?
Yes, I do. I have can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Yes, hi, Lainie. This is Manu. So I have a question that's probably unpopular, but it's practical. So I want to travel the world with my child, if I could do it again. So what about the academics?
What about them?
But how do you immerse that into your travel? Because you may not be equipped with books, or just how did you cover that if you did? Because you didn't have a glass ball at the time. You didn't know that you would do this for 15 years. You set out to do it for 1 year, and some kids still want to go to college or do something. So how do you collect those points?
Okay, so this is a very common question. I've spoken at so many homeschooling conferences on this topic. So we became what's called unschoolers. And in fact, because of the nature of our relationship, we are considered radical unschoolers. Although I don't like those labels because it says you're not doing something versus the fact of what you're doing. The core of our journey was based on trust. And I noticed during the first 6 months that without prompting my son, he was learning, and his curiosity peaked because he was empowered. It was fun. We were learning in partnership, and we were guiding the journey. And I'm going to back up a little bit. One of the other scaffolding things that I tried to empower was saying yes to as many things as we absolutely could. And the way that we said yes is by checking to see whether or not these things were in alignment with our core values. And that was one of the tools that we used. But by saying yes, that really set us up to consider everything. And 8 months into our journey, Miro, knowing that we're saying yes to everything, said to me, "Mom, can we just continue doing this forever?" And of course, I had to say yes. But part of the things that I was really connected to was researching and making sure that the journey was safe. That's my skill and what I brought to the partnership. And that's when I discovered that there is a thing called unschooling. I had never heard of it before. And I recognized that not only was this thing called unschooling or natural learning or self-directed learning, but we were already doing it, and we were doing it in partnership, and it was working. And since I, at that point, discovered that there was this thing called unschooling, I now had more to add to my scaffolding. So I read everything I could about unschooling. I read John Holt. I read all of the books. I've got a massive reference section in my book. A lot of it's on education, a lot of it's on childbearing, lots of references in my book. So there's a lot there if you're interested in going deeper in some of these foundations. But what I recognized, because trust was a huge part of the journey, I had to sit back and trust that my son would get the things that he needed out of life and out of this journey. And so part of what I did, and I checked in with him after I did this, was I wrote down all of the things that I wanted for my son in terms of quote unquote education. And we had to pull that word apart. Education is an institutional agreement that the Western world observes and agrees that it's something, it's an establishment. It includes curriculum, scope and sequence, testing and evaluation. And those were not the things that I wanted for my son. So instead of using the word education, I adapted my own language, my own use of language to use the word learning. And when I was able to do that, that was like a huge aha moment for me. So what did I want my son to learn? What would I wish for him? Well, I wanted him to learn a lot of the soft skills. So collaboration, cooperation. I wanted him to learn decision-making, logic, and reasoning. I wanted him to learn how to learn, how to research. I wanted him to develop a deep level of learning, because once you've got all of those things, you can learn anything you want. And by having your own power to self-educate yourself, that gave him a lot of freedom. And I trusted that the things that he was interested in, he would gravitate towards. And guess what? He's 24 now. I wasn't wrong. He has got PhD level, and I know this because I'll tell you why, but PhD level knowledge on Greek mythology. Now, is that important? Some people might say no, some people might say yes, but this was a deep passion. And it was such a deep passion for him. I took him to Greece, and we spent day after day after day in the Greek, the museums, the anthropology museums in Athens, having conversation after conversation with the docents, and they were blown away at his knowledge. And they are the ones that said, I cannot believe how much you know and how much you've read. And they're talking to a 14-year-old. And I can't believe that I've spoken to PhDs in this subject that don't know as much as you. And to me, that gave me a sense of exhaling. I know he can learn. I know that things that he's interested in learning, he will learn. And he has, and he's done a lot with the things that he's learned. And it's not just Greek mythology. A lot of that passion came from my interest that I discovered in pre-Columbian history, because we were in Latin America and I didn't know anything about it. I was hungry and thirsty to learn more, and I dragged him in partnership, not drag, but our deal was, I'm going to go seek out the things that I'm interested in, and you're going to seek out the things you're interested in. We're going to go support each other. So he dragged me, not drag, but it's language, right? We went to farms because he was super interested in agriculture for some reason. And that was one of his passions for a couple of years, and now it's not. But my passion was pre-Columbian history. And from the pre-Columbian history and the museums all throughout Latin America and the archaeological sites, he got interested in origin stories. And origin stories took him to world mythology. And he discovered that he had a real deep passion for the Greek mythology. And what's that guy's name who wrote the books? I'm totally blanking. He wrote a bunch of books for kids about Greek mythology. I can't remember what they're called, but anybody who has a teen now will know who I'm talking about. He can't stand those books because they're a fictionized version that's not accurate, based on the Iliad he's read like these volumes this thick, and that took him to different forms of poetry and literature, world literature. And I can't even tell you the things that this kid knows, because he had the time and the invitation to research and follow his passions. Now, he chose not to go to college, but I'll tell you, he's 24 now, but at 18, he could have gotten into any college, because he was a partner with me running Project World School. He was selected to be one of the young global youth, something in Switzerland, youth leaders, not the world, not the WEF, not that, but yeah, no, not that. I can't remember what it's called, but this was when he was 18. He did a TED talk. He's volunteered all around the world. He's done so many things. He's gotten articles published. He's taught courses. All at 18, he would have been invited to any Ivy League school he wanted to go to. And part of my job as his partner in learning was recording these things. And because we spoke at conference after conference after conference, we had presentations like, here's the geology portion of what we did, but we never broke it down to geology. Here's the chemistry portion of what we did. And I'd show pictures and share all the different adventures that we had. So my job was to distill the experiences and break them into subjects, but life doesn't work that way. But that's what I did in preparation for him in case he wanted to go to college. So all of those topics were touched on that are required for college admission through experiential learning and self-directed learning. And learning is the key, not the education portion, because the education portion is the institutional stuff that we just sort of said, we're not playing that game. That's not us. We're not adhering to a system that we don't believe in. And that is empowerment.
I love your passion.
Yeah.
Does that answer to Manu? I'm sure it does. So wonderful. I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. And really, it's the difference between learning and education. You've said that so beautifully. Did you want to say something, Manu? Yes, please, dear.
No, thank you. That totally makes sense. In my sort of everyday worlds, like, oh, how did you do in math? And, da, 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 da. And you check off the boxes. And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Lainie, how can people learn more about you, get a hold of you, your website, some links that we can maybe put in the chat? But I'll also, when I edit this video, I will put Lainie's information at the bottom so that we can have it on YouTube. And if any of your friends have missed this rich talk from Lainie Liberti, you can give them the link that I'll have ready for you. So please, Lainie, how can people get your book? How can they learn more? And please tell a little bit more about your Thursday Zooms with teens.
Sure. Yeah. So you can find out all about the work that I do at a bunch of websites. The first one is Transformative Mentoring for Teens. I also have a link there about my book. So all the information about my book can be found there. Also the courses that I facilitate. I teach teens during a 12-week course, and it's really exposing them to these tools. And then my son and I co-teach or co-facilitate. The word teach is a little weird. We're facilitating. We co-facilitate for tweens an 8-week course, and it's exposing the younger group to tools in a sort of gamified fashion. And it's a lot of fun. So all that information is on Transformative Mentoring for Teens. My son and I also co-founded Project World School 10 years ago. And since then, we've brought hundreds of teens to countries around the world, many. I wish I could count. I bet I can count. I mean, there's Peru and Ecuador and Mexico and Japan and South Africa and Greece, all over. So we've done trips all over. We do intro trips, which are shorter 9-10 day trips. And then we do 3-week or 1-month trips. So that's at Project World School. And then also, I don't do this. I do this one time a year. So I don't do it very often, but I've got a website called Partnership Parenting. And actually on Friday, my son and I are doing this Friday a free 2-hour workshop. Him and I are co-facilitating this workshop all about partnership parenting. And so many people, of course, want to ask him questions like, what was it like to grow up in partnership and not having a boss? And then the following Monday, we're launching a 5-week course that my son and I are co-facilitating for parents. So I don't work with parents all that much. So those are the projects that I have going. And then finally, since 2020, because the majority of my work was in the world before 2020, through Project World School and the summits and stuff like that, I took in order to serve my community, I started hosting these virtual meetups, which are safe spaces for teens. Thursday call is for the older teens, and it's a 2-hour call. I've been doing this for free since 2020. We meet every week. And the calls are the first hour we talk philosophy or some sort of self-development. And the second hour we play, because play is fun. I love playing. And then I do the same thing for the younger group on Saturdays. So I do these 4 hours every single week since 2020. I mean, there are a few occasions where I take time off. But they're free calls, and I think it's really important to create these safe spaces that are fun for young people. And young people know that there's somebody that's showing up for them. I don't need something from them. I am showing up for them, and they can count on me, and I see them, and I hear them, and I understand them. And that's really why I do the work that I do.
Oh, so beautiful, so nourishing. I want to shout it from the rooftops that this is truly education, not for the future, education for now. Teens, Tools, and Hope, and the queen of all queens, Teens, Tools, and Hope, was just with us tonight, Lainie Liberti. 2 weeks, Leon Campbell Jr., meeting teens where they are. A different view of what Lainie's been talking about, but truly he's been working for the Youth and Family Division of Agape International Spiritual Center for over 15 years. We're so thrilled to have him. And we've got all the way through July 25th, where we're going to be doing EMF effects on teens with Anthony Asher. And as a plus, we're going to have, and we're so honored that Lainie can join us for a teen panel. She's going to be our moderator. Thank you, Lainie. That's going to come in August. We'll give you the dates. We're going to give great blessings and virtual hugs to Lainie. And any last questions before we say adios and arrivederci?
Thank you so much, Lainie. Very inspirational. I wish I was 10 years younger. I'd travel with you.
Come to Mexico.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank
That was
you.
ever more than that.
That's every bit as wonderful as I thought it was going to be. I'm so thrilled. And I have two people who are very much in need of your assistance, and I can't wait to talk to them about it.
Awesome.
Really, really beautiful. Yeah.